Some of you have seen part of this before, and I apologize if you have, but I think there's some huge value in the foundation that is needed. So today I wanted to go through the principles. I'm going to move through some of them pretty quickly. Principles of body temple stewardship and taking care of our body the way God has revealed it. Just 2 weeks ago, we covered the scriptures that talk about the principles that were revealed in Genesis to Adam and Eve, and also to Noah, and the principles that were revealed in Daniel chapter 1 that Daniel held to from his upbringing. I find that the principles that I'm going to introduce today, or the scriptures that we'll introduce today, are also very, very supportive of, or the same as, those principles. And so I want to talk to these scriptures in a little bit greater depth than sometimes we notice them, because that depth gives us an immediate understanding or a deeper understanding that we can guide ourselves through. So here we go. Typically I have a handout with this one, and I ask beforehand, write down when you ate, what you ate today and what you drank today. And then as we go through, evaluate, or yesterday or the day before, last week, evaluate what you're eating and drinking based on this group of principles that have been revealed by our Heavenly Father. First, a very simple principle of the spiritual guiding principle of our body stewardship. And we'll look at a few of the scriptures and a few of the principles. The first one being, we are children of heavenly parents. That foundational principle is absolutely critical as a foundation. If we forget that we're children of heavenly parents, a lot of what we do loses meaning, and we don't have the motivation to do it as guided and so forth. So it means that we're first spirit beings. Our body is combined with our spirit during mortality. We're still mortal during this phase, but we're still primarily spiritual. We were involved in the war before this life, the war between good and evil, the war between following Jesus Christ and following Lucifer or Satan. And we chose, as evidenced by the fact that we're on this life, to follow Jesus Christ. And that really does guide us significantly on a lot of what we do. Our body is a temple, as stated in 1 Corinthians, know ye not that you're the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. And that temple was paid for, or our body temple was paid for, the ownership of it was paid for by the blood of Christ. And so it's really not our own. It is a stewardship over this body. And I know I've talked about this at length in the past. I'm going to at least define stewardship again. Bishop Gerald Kazay of the Presiding Bishopric said, in gospel terms, the word stewardship designates a sacred spiritual or temporal responsibility to take care of something that belongs to God, for which we are accountable. This tabernacle of clay, as we might call it, is our stewardship. It is also governed by words. Because it's obedient to us, our body is completely obedient to our words. And our inherited creativity is manifested in this stewardship and in the words that we use over this stewardship. It's interesting, and I know I've talked about this multiple times. Sometimes we don't realize the words that we're saying. sometimes our words, because they've been with us for so long, are just a part of the way we think. And so they don't get monitored, I guess I would say. They aren't noticed. And we're just saying things without recognizing that it's creating a challenge. I have a gentleman I'm working with right now whose blood sugar and blood pressure is high, and it's been very resistant to change. And I ask, what are you saying to yourself? And he's continuing to say, I have high blood sugar. I have high blood pressure, or my blood pressure is high. And the body's being obedient to that I have, I am statement. And so even though he's trying to change diet and command it to function at just 100% and be set perfectly right, it's still staying high because his words are saying, I have, I am, in a manner that is not what he wants as an outcome. So anyway, our words mean a lot in that stewardship, and our body is very obedient. I've mentioned this already. We are spirit beings in a mortal body. But so I kind of use the image, our spirits above us, if we can call it that, our mental and our emotional, our mind and our heart filters impact how well the spirit's able to govern the body. So if our mental and our emotional are not aligned with our spiritual, our body is obedient to that mental or emotional filter instead of to our spirit governing it. In Ether 12, verse 27, it makes it clear that God gave us weaknesses. We're designed by our Heavenly Father with weaknesses. And part of our stewardship in the care of that body is to understand those weaknesses. It says, if men and women come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. I give, or gift, that's a gift, unto men and women weakness, that they may be humble. And my grace is sufficient for all men and women that humble themselves before me. For if they humble themselves before me and have faith in me, then will I make weak things become strong unto them. And so two things impressed me about this. One, it was a gift. So being grateful for the gift is part of our ability to change how that gift acts in us. In other words, we have the ability to be grateful for it, and then we're not fighting that gift. We're instead making it a part of our life so that it's a gift to us. And then, of course, as it says, if we go to God and ask for a change in that gift, we can get the Savior's atonement and God's help in changing that gift. So just being willing to change that gift or ask for God's help in changing that gift is a blessing in it. These are the ones we covered 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to put the references here if anyone hadn't seen them before, because Adam and Eve were given specific instructions of what to eat, and that's recorded in Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, and also repeated in Genesis chapter 3, verse 18, and also in Moses chapter 2, verse 29. Noah was given the exact same guidance and a short exception to that guidance in Genesis 9, 1 through 4, and also in the Joseph Smith translation of Genesis 9 in verses 8, 9, and 10 and 11. It clarified that very clearly. The book of Daniel, in Daniel 1, verses 1 through 20, teaches the same principles. And now what I'd like to look at today in more depth is the Word of Wisdom in Doctrine and Covenants 89 that outlines the same principles. But first, I want to mention a natural law that, when overlaid on these principles that are taught in the scriptures, helps us to apply it more broadly in our life. So, and that natural law is the natural law of acid-alkaline balance. And it's the way acid and alkaline work for our wellness in our body. Perhaps if you've had a fish tank and you monitored that fish tank for alkalinity, this will make sense to you. Typically, if I teach this class in person, I say, who's had a fish tank? What's the alkalinity set at? And I'll get the answer back that they monitor it for 7.2, 7.3, and the fish do wonderful at 7.2, 7.3 on the alkaline scale. I'll show that scale in just a second for those of us who don't remember the pH scale from chemistry or high school chemistry or college chemistry. Now, here's how quickly, let's say it's a 10-gallon fish tank. And I use 10 gallons because if I'm roughly 120 pounds, I've got about 10 gallons of water in me, or 80 some pounds of water. Now, 10 gallons of water weighs 80 pounds. If we didn't have our cells holding it, we would be sloshing all over the place. But I just wanted to use this illustration because if we take that 10-gallon fish tank and we pour a single can of Diet Pepsi or Dr. Pepper or Coke or any of those in it, it takes that fish tank and moves it from a 7.2 pH to a 4 pH instantly. And within minutes, all of the fish are dead. Well, in our body, we have the same reaction to a can of soda because we're primarily water. The biggest difference is our body gives up calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and dumps it into the bloodstream, which is then filtered and is dumped through the kidneys into the bladder and into the urine. And when we test the urine after a single can of soda, if it's caffeinated soda like the Pepsis and so forth, it increases the calcium in the urine by 1,600%. So it's just pulling from the body calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, all of the alkaline minerals to keep us alive. So we dump strong acid in, what would kill all the fish, instead in us just pulls from all of our reserves and dumps it out. Or if our filtration system, the kidneys, is not working properly, it stores it in fat for those that store in fat, or for those of us who store in joints, it stores it in calcium deposits in the joints. And so we've then got a calcium deposit in the joints that's creating arthritis or a bone spur and pain and issues. So let's take a little bit more in-depth look at this law of acid-alkaline balance because it affects everything we do. You'll notice on this one that the law of acid-alkaline balance, just a quick review, neutral is 7, the middle of this measurement scale, and it's a man-made measurement scale, is 7. The alkaline side goes from 7 to 14. Our blood, for us to maintain life, must be slightly alkaline, and it's monitored very carefully at 7.365. That single can of soda took it from 7.365 to a 4, which is on the acid side of the scale. Acid can go clear down to 0. You'll remember from our digestion topic last week that our food starts at in the mouth at 7.2 or something like that, and then moves to the body, or gets swallowed and into the stomach, and it moves to roughly a 2 pH. So it goes extremely acid. So let's now take that concept, that acid-alkaline concept, and I will just go through one thing at a time of how that acid-alkaline concept works in the body. But first, just a really quick reminder, Doctrine and Covenants 29 verses 34 and 35 says, well, wherefore, verily I say unto you that all things unto me are spiritual, and not at any time have I given unto you a law which was temporal, neither any man nor the children of men, neither Adam your father whom I created. And so even this law, which is largely physical or temporal as we call it, is a spiritual law that helps us to govern ourselves. I will mention here that it is an ordinance, or like some ordinances, it is not critical for our salvation, like our covenants of baptism and so forth are. But while not essential for salvation, it is important or helpful for our comfort, our guidance, our encouragement, our physical well-being. Okay, with that note, notice that in verse 2, Doctrine and Covenants verse 2, it says, to be sent by greeting, not by commandment or by constraint, but by revelation and the word of wisdom, showing forth the order and will of God in the temporal salvation of all saints in the last days, given for a principle with a promise, adapted to the capacity of the weak and the weakest of all saints who are or can be called saints. I consider myself in the weakest group of that, and we'll notice that that promise is in the very last verse. We'll get to that in a moment. Verse 4, it says, behold, verily, thus saith the Lord unto you, in consequence of evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days, I have warned you and forewarn you by giving you this word of wisdom by revelation. If we were to just go through some of the conspiring men, I will just mention a general principle here and not dig into the conspiracy theory, but the general principle is, with conspiring men, it's how can I make money? How can I put more money in my pocket? And maybe that's at the expense of many of the other people who are living in this world. And we found that the tobacco industry, when they were governed by law, immediately changed their investment into the food industry. And so much of the food that we have being produced right now is being produced to become addictive or to be addictive to the body. And so just recognizing that that effort is going on to make us eat more things that aren't beneficial. We could talk about this in depth, but I don't want to spend time on that particular thing. Instead, I want to spend time on what I will call the don'ts, the do's, and the sometimes of the word wisdom. We'll take a look at the don'ts in verses 5 through 9, which you will notice those are all acidic. We will take a look at the do's in verses 10 and 11 and also 14 and 16. And then we'll take a look at the sometimes guidance in verses 12 and 13 and verse 15. So first, the don'ts. This is coded strongly acidic and is in red for those things that are harsh for the body. And those things actually do test as strongly acidic in the body. Let's read them and find out what they are. Verse 5 says, that inasmuch as any man drinketh wine or strong drink among you, behold, it is not good, neither meet in the sight of your Father, only in assembling yourselves together to offer up your sacraments before him. And behold, this should be wine, yea, pure wine of the grape of the vine of your own make. That would be new grape juice. Verse 7, and again, strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. And that was commonly used in years past, is they would use alcohols to cleanse the body because they didn't have any other appropriate methods for cleansing. So, and we know even today that alcohol will cleanse a cut or a wound or something like that. Verse 8, and again, tobacco is not for the body, neither for the belly, and is not good for man. So this was given in 1833, and tobacco was being used significantly, and so were wine and alcohols. And in the next verse it says, and again, hot drinks are not for the body or for the belly. So we've got a bunch of red things or acidic things that the Lord has guided us. These things aren't good for the body. Our body, as we saw in that slide, needs to maintain the blood at 7.365. And if, like in the fish tank, we dump in a 2, which is what a soda is a 2 pH, it drops everything to a 4 and pulls things out. So wine, strong drink, tobacco, the hot drinks were evaluated or interpreted at the time that this was given as coffees and teas, which were high in caffeine, but anything that's too hot for the body is also not good. If we were to take that and just broaden it a little bit, then the caffeines, the soda in the fish tank, is also going to be very, very hard on the body. It's going to drop the alkalinity in the body very, very rapidly into the acid side. So that's the list of don'ts in the body and how they affect us as don'ts. I want to talk about the do's next. Verses 10 and 11. So here we have green-coated do's. And again, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man. Every herb in the season thereof. So herb in this sense, wholesome herb, every herb, that means plants, that means fruits and vegetables. It doesn't mean specifically and only the ones that we have classified as medicinal herbs. So verse 11 again, every herb in the season thereof, every fruit in the season thereof, all of these to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. I want to talk about those two words that I've underlined. So we see I've underlined every herb and every fruit, but I've also underlined thanksgiving. And that principle of thanksgiving is a documented scientific principle of thank you power, gratitude power, the science of gratitude. In Psalms 95, verse 2, it says, let us come before his presence with thanksgiving and make a joyful noise unto him with psalms. I read 2 of these books. I'd love to perhaps read some of the others, but we've got a huge science that has written book after book after book about how quickly our gratitude changes how our body responds to the food we eat, to the water we drink, to the situations we're in. I've only listed 8 book titles here on the psychology of gratitude, the science of gratitude, but it's amazing how much research has been done on this one topic of the science of gratitude. And if you look at it, the science of gratitude, the water experiments, the freezing water, all of those actually showed how fast gratitude changes water. So in verse 11, where it says, herbs and fruit and every plant is to be used in the season thereof, and with prudence or balance and thanksgiving. That huge clue about what thanksgiving does to improve the food we eat. Why do we say a blessing on our food? To give gratitude and to improve it, actually. I want to take just a minute and mention this principle that I've noticed. And the principle could be summarized as, if it is made by man, it is not made for the body. If it is made by God, then it is made for our body or for maintaining our body. In other words, if man has modified a food and put it in a can or a box with chemicals added to make it last longer, it's now man-made. It's not God-made anymore. Whereas if we can eat it fresh, the way God intended it in season, it is God-made. And we could spend a lot more time on that principle, but it's simply said that God made it. And he made the plants for our good, and all of the plants. Let's look at this sometimes in the Word of Wisdom. We'll run into one more page of this too. I've coded this red because they are acid. Verse 12, yea, flesh also of beasts and of the fowls of the air, I the Lord have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they, the beasts and the fowls of the air, is what it's referring to, they are to be used sparingly. Verse 13 puts a extra little bit of guidance on that one. 13 says, and it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or of cold or of famine. You will notice the same principle on meat taught in Doctrine and Covenants 49 verses 19 and 21, and also Genesis 9 verses 9 through 11 in the Joseph Smith translation. And so we get that same principle of eating meat sparingly and only using it to preserve our lives in times of winter, cold, or famine, when nothing else is available, when we can't get the food. You will remember that Noah was given that same exception very briefly as they landed the ark and there was no other food growing. But they were told that every animal that they killed would be required at their hand. They had to justify every animal that they killed. And we get that same guidance in Doctrine and Covenants 49:21, that the blood of every animal that we shed is going to be required at our hand. So just recognizing that it's consistent across all of the scriptures in that one. A plant-based diet is challenging in today's world. We can look at a lot of resources to switch to plant-based. I've shown this one that says how to start a plant-based diet, one of the videos. I want to keep going though on the do's in the Word of Wisdom. Verses 14 and 16 are more do's. Again, I've coded them green because they're alkaline. Verse 14, all grain is ordained for the use of man and of beasts, to be the staff of life, not only for man, but for the beasts of the field, and the fowls of heaven, and all wild animals that run or creep on the earth. Verse 15, and these, speaking of the wild animals, hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess of hunger. So he repeats that again in verse 15. Verse 16, again he starts with all grain is good for the food of man, as also the fruit of the vine, that which yieldeth fruit, whether in the ground or above the ground. I should have stopped at all grain is ordained, because in verse, I think it's 10, it says all fruit is ordained. That word ordained has specific meaning. I picture Heavenly Father giving a blessing, a very specific priesthood blessing to those plants and to the grains, and ordaining them or setting them apart specifically for our use and to be good for us. Isn't that amazing that He actually set them apart, gave them to us for our good, for our use? And it says all grain is ordained. I want to look at the all grain idea for just a moment. There are so many grains. On this slide, I have listed 10 gluten grains and 10 gluten-free grains. And they're not in any order, just in the order pretty much that I was introduced to them, I guess, on the gluten grains. Hard red wheat, hard white wheat, red fife wheat, turkey red wheat, barley, hamut, rye, spelt, emmer, and einkorn. So there's 10 gluten grains. There's also 10 on the gluten-free side. Oats, corn, sorghum, teff, rice, quinoa, buckwheat, millet, wild rice, and amaranth. And what I have learned is that as I vary the grains that I eat, I get benefit from the different materials that are in each one of those grains. And so I try and vary through the different grains consistently and not eat the same grain day after day, because the variety gives our gut bacteria the exact food they need to eat, because there's 5,000 gut bacteria eating different foods and needing that food to come in with its package on it. Our gut bacteria needs the fiber there because that's what they eat. That's what they survive on. And then they provide to us the materials that they take out of that fiber and put it into our bloodstream so that it's beneficial to us. And when we eat a variety of grains, our wellness improves over time. Now, the promise of the word of wisdom, the last 4 verses. Verse 18. And all saints who remember to keep and do these sayings, walking in obedience to the commandments, shall receive health in their navel and marrow in their bones, and shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures, and shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint. And I, the Lord, give unto them a promise that the destroying angel shall pass by them as the children of Israel and not slay them. Amen. So powerful in the promise. And it's stated as a shall statement. That's the outcome that I, God, have given to you if you'll just follow the principles that are here. What changes would increase my alignment to what I know? What can I drop from the food and drink? What can I add to the food and drink? And then some of you may not have control over that completely. So make a note of what you do have control over, what you can do to be more in alignment with that. I want to talk real quickly about the outcome of living the word of wisdom principles with a quick story or two. And I wish I'd found a picture of both these events to post in this, but it's been a few years ago. We're now in our late 60s, beyond the 65 point. And so I'm going to say it's been about 6 or 7 years ago that we went, I was serving, no, it's been longer than that, 12 years ago for this first one, a 50-mile bike ride with the Boy Scouts. I did no time training. So let's go back to the start of the story. I was serving with the young men in church, and they said, I want to go on a 50-mile bike ride. I think that'd be cool. And I'm going, well, my bicycle hasn't been ridden in months. The tires are flat. I guess I better get it ready to go. I hadn't done anything. And that week was too busy to do any training, any riding just to try and get my riding legs back underneath of me. But we went on the bike ride and we made it, and I was fine. 50 miles, I don't know, 4 hours, something like that. I don't remember exactly how long it took. But everyone was tired and sore. And I made it. And the next day, I saw those boys again at church. All of them were sore. I was not sore. I'll tell you the key to that in just a minute. The other instance, my wife and I were scheduled to go on the Havasupai or Grand Canyon hike. It's a 12-mile into the falls and so forth, and it's all downhill, switchbacks for the first mile, and then downhill from there on. And so coming back out of that after 3 days of camping, we were with her youngest brother, which is 15 years younger, and his teenage children, his wife, and also a friend of theirs and their teenage children. And we were the oldest ones in our late 50s or early 60s. I don't remember exactly how many years ago it was, but we were also the first ones out of there because we had been eating alkaline. We'd been eating by the word of wisdom. And in both these cases, I was not drinking sodas. I was not drinking Gatorades, which Gatorades, by the way, is the same acidity as a soda and has sugar in it and chemicals to make it um, with minerals. We had instead been using a powerhouse of alkaline and superhydration that we call swamp water. My wife made this combination, and I'm not saying this is the only method. I think you need to eat right first. But by using this to make sure it stays hydrated the whole time, it worked. What is it? Jurassic green, which is a combination of green powders that Dr. Christopher put together. You could use others. I'm sure you could use others. A quart of water, lemon juice, roughly half a lemon or 2 tablespoons of real lemon, and then real salt. I know that's cut off a little bit at the bottom there. About a half a teaspoon of sea salt. Real salt is the one that we trust. By keeping that alkaline going in during the entire time of the hike or the entire time of that 50-mile ride, I was able to move through it without any challenges at all because the acids that were being created by the body were replaced as quickly as they were being created. So that's going to raise some questions and probably some responses because it's a major change. I'm going to drop out of screen share and just ask for your questions now.
Yeah, real quick. What does your swamp water taste like?
With that combination, the swamp water actually, it still tastes green, but with enough salt and with enough lemon. So we had to modify it a little bit. I end up putting more green in than she likes, and some people modify it and put a lot more salt and lemon in. But all of those pieces together are very alkalizing. It doesn't taste bad to me. One more story on the swamp water. A couple of years ago, uh, I had hired a 14-year-old girl who was very, very hardworking. I knew her family ethics. I knew her hard work. It's probably been 5 years, 6 years ago now, because I think she just returned from a mission a year ago, last year. Anyway, I worked with her for the first hour. It was yard work. It was working out in really hot sun, southern Utah sun. And after an hour, she was just waning very, very quickly. And I'm going, uh-oh, she's not going to make it for another 15 minutes even. So I said, let's take a break real quick. And we grabbed a drink of swamp water, and while she didn't like the taste, she drank it down anyway. And I pushed another glassful on her, and she drank the second glassful. And we went back out, and she made it through another hour of work without any effort at all. And really, really amazing. But I also know her family was a very heavy meat eating family, just by nature. And by alkalizing with swamp water, she was able to work in the hot sun without any effort.
And is this what helps with the soreness too, you were saying?
Oh, absolutely, because the soreness is created by the fact that the body is storing um, lactic acid and so forth and trying to put it somewhere. Whereas if we're bringing in the alkaline materials faster than the acids are being created, then the body's going, oh, let me just replace that and clean out the acids. And so there is no soreness. For me, there was zero soreness, and that was true for the hike and for the 50-mile bike ride. I didn't finish that out, but after 12 miles, and you're carrying a backpack because you spent the week camping, and Winona and I were the first ones out. Well, I set down my backpack at the car and walked back down the entire um, mile of switchbacks to pick up the backpack of her brother's wife who was unable to go any farther, and walked out with it. And so it's amazing what the body will do when it has the right materials coming in consistently. And I'm not saying try swamp water as the cure all. It needs to go along with an alkaline diet over the long term also. But swamp water, in those times when we know we're going to have a ton of stress on the body, is absolutely powerful in the ability to create the ability to keep going.
Brad, just on that note, I've never done the swamp water before, but last year I started with my hiking. I would take the calcium pills, and every once in a while, as I had a drink, I would take my calcium pills, and I was amazed that I did not have the muscle soreness. But those were shorter day hikes, not 50 milers.
Yes, and calcium is alkaline, isn't it? So absolutely. And just getting it in it on a daily basis so that we're getting fresh fruits and vegetables, calciums. And for the swamp water, I don't use it daily. I use it when I'm going to hit something that's really stressful, high heat, high use, those kinds of things. It wouldn't hurt to take it daily, but it's one of those that's kind of I reserve it for the need. Not that it tastes bad. I like it, but the body doesn't seem to need that much alkaline all at once most of the time. Thank you again each for joining, and I won't be running this topic again. I'm going to jump to a new topic next time. So, but I wanted to cover it deep enough to go, okay, now we've covered it for a few weeks in a row. There's a foundation built. Let's see what we can do in the future. As always, you're welcome to send me questions, your thoughts, your notes, and we will continue learning together. And please refer other people to it. I love the learning and growing part with your friends also. All right. We'll see you next time.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Fred.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.